Hello, welcome to Queens Rising. I'm Nickie Smith, and this is Chanel Dickerson. On our show, we talk about women's empowerment and real life issues. And on today's segment, we're going to talk about the police abuse of power. Chanel?
Yeah, Nickie, this is really the conversation about the elephant in the room, and this is a much needed conversation. And I don't think two more qualified people can actually have this conversation than you and I. And so I am elated to be here with you on such a serious topic. I'm not elated about the situation, but that we get to have this conversation and we can be transparent in having this conversation and help heal the community. And our prayers go out for the Nichols family because he did not deserve to lose his life from an encounter with police officers.
Most definitely. Chanel, when you and I talked about doing this segment today, I was really just heartbroken because you and I both have wanted to be police officers. This is what we wanted. And when I see that individuals that have sworn, raised their right hand to say, protect and serve to the community, it just breaks my heart because it makes us all look bad. And the hard thing for people to understand and is that, guess what? Not all officers are bad, and even good officers despise these type of officers. These things are happening way too much in our community, and it has to stop. I mean, we talked about training. There have been things put in place, cameras, just extra training. What happens is some people that start off good for whatever reason, they turn bad. But the duty to intervene, in Memphis, we have seen, we saw officers walking around. No one reported. And the duty to intervene is serious. If you see something that is not right, you should say something. However, Chanel, you and I talked about this. When it comes to certain things, when officers do tell the things that happen to them on agencies, how they are shut out, officers don't want to back them up on calls anymore. But usually it's not things like this. This is just horrific. But those are things that happen. But we have to get to a point where people are saying enough is enough. Officer such and such, stop, pull them off.
Yes.
We have
fight
to.
them.
Yes.
Fight them. Do use physical force if necessary to keep from someone taking the life of someone else.
Right. I mean, we've seen this happen over and over and over again. And the unfortunate part is I think people are getting desensitized. What happens? This type of thing happens, we march, right? That's really the order of things. We march.
Yeah.
Things need to change. People, for whatever reason, are coming to be police officers for the wrong reason. And then you do have some officers, people say this all the time, and I know you've heard it, Chanel. Oh, you guys missed something in the background.
Yeah.
It's rare that things are missed in the background. I'm going to tell you what happens. I say it like it's a marriage, right? When you first married your partner, you hear people that when the marriage ends, they say he or she wasn't the person that I married.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So that's the same thing that happens in law enforcement or any other job. Things change. I mean, we've talked about it in other segments. I think we see so many things that we shouldn't see. And it is okay to download, to get some couch time, talk to somebody, and it's okay not to be okay.
Yeah.
And until you're okay, you need not to put that gun and that badge back on.
Yeah.
And it's not okay. And I'm upset about it because this policing is a career that I love. I love the community. And it was always hard. And I can speak for myself, and I'm sure for you, when things like this happened across the nation, we had to go out in front of the community and we had to explain the actions of others when we actually did not even understand why they did it. It made no sense.
Yes. No, I agree with you, Nickie. My take on the entire situation is I'm heartbroken behind this. When I watched Tyree Nichols' mother talk about how the police came to her house to tell her about the incident and then tell her that she couldn't go to the hospital. And then when the doctor called to ask her why wasn't she at the hospital and her son was going into cardiac arrest. When did we become so, as a profession, so desensitized that you have caused harm to this young man and you don't want his mother to be there? Like it just felt like to me like a cover up was happening during the initial time, and then to learn that 2 EMTs have been relieved of duty because they didn't offer aid like immediately. And then I heard that like 2 Shelby County deputies, they arrived on the scene after. Now they have been relieved of duty until pending investigation. And I'm just looking at all of this, right? And what can't continue to happen, we can't talk about a use of force framework, right? Because I've heard someone mention the use of force framework. Okay, nothing they did. I mean, come on, like they immediately approached him, opened the door to pull him out of the car. They're using profanity. Like that is in no use of force framework or a conduct policy on any agency. So it's bigger than that, right? And when we talk about the duty to intervene, is I look at that and I know that you're ostracized when you do that, right? And so what happens? People feel uncomfortable. They think about that they need to take care of their families. So if they go against the grain to tell on other police officers, they're going to be blackballed. And like you stated, people are not going to back you up. And you need your partners and fellow police officers to back you up so you can go home safely to your family. So I think what needs to happen after this situation is we really need to look into police reform from the lens of making sure that the culture inside of the agency doesn't breed this, because we can have all the policies, right? And when I look at things, we can have policy and then there's practice. So we all a lot of police departments put in their policy the duty to intervene because they want to make sure there's something written to say you are supposed to do this. But those officers, and for 5 officers, I don't care whatever role they played in this, how do you get 5 police officers to go along with this, right? And they were in a unit, and the name of the unit was Scorpion. And so I caution every police leader across this country that you have to pay attention to the name of these units. Like there's power in words. There's power in a name. Someone looked at what they could make this unit up as to be Scorpion, right? To use the acronym Scorpion. And Scorpion is a predator. And so you have to look at the leadership in this unit. It's not just that a supervisor or sergeant was not on the scene, because I heard one of the law enforcement analysts mention that there was no sergeant on the scene. Like this behavior shows that there is a problem embedded in that unit, in that department. It is something really wrong there. And it's not just collectively, Nickie and I go out and we make a traffic stop and then it just escalates, right? This is a unit that went out and 5 police officers did this.
Right. Well, when you think about it, as I'm listening to you speak, when you think about a few things, because it happened in Baltimore, it's these small specialized units, right?
Yeah.
And there's a lack of supervision, and it's more than just a sergeant, as you say.
Yeah.
And what happens a lot of times, people leave these units alone if they're producing.
Yes.
Okay. But the question is, how are you producing? Yeah. Are you within the guidelines? Are you within the use of force continuum? Are you within the law? But a lot of times it's one of those, you're producing. So we have high crime numbers. So you're producing. We want you to continue to produce, but we need to have oversight, right? We need to have oversight. And like you said, there's power in names. How are you all doing this? How are you getting these, these lockups? So to say, a lot of times certain commanders are worried about the bottom line, but they're not worried about how they got there. When I'm just thinking about these various groups, as I think about other individuals that have been victimized and ultimately it's led to death. Yes. Sometimes it's these specialized units that no one is watching. Yes. And sometimes these officers become empowered and they forget that why they joined the profession, or at least why they swore and to protect and serve. Because I can't say why people are joining because as an instructor, former instructor, we would ask officers or recruits, why did you join? And sometimes you would hear all kinds of things. So I'm coming from two different sides, the training side of things, but also being the commander of the recruiting side of things. So with that being said, we have to ask those pertinent questions, and there has to be constant evaluations, not just the I'm going to do your evaluations. And, different agencies have numbers. I know where I came from, it was a 1 to 4 or something like that, or 5, something like that. So if you get all 4s and 5s, you're good. But did you really evaluate them? I would tell people all the time, you can't fill this form out properly if you didn't evaluate the work that they did at some point, right? And it's just heart-wrenching. It was on the news. It just kept playing over and over and over again. And then I had family members call me and say, well, this is why we don't trust the police.
Yes,
And,
exactly.
it's not the black ones, the white ones, it's just police in general. And what I said to them was, it's bad seeds. And the bad seeds might not have a race, but it's bad seeds. But trust me, there are more good seeds than bad. But we have to show this. And the good seeds, if you see the bad seeds, you have to say something. We are beyond, because this is what happens. We've seen it. When you have bad seeds like this, they cause harm to folks. And then you have the young lady that was in Baltimore that was sitting in her cruiser, and someone came up and shot her.
Shot her, yes.
Right, because she had nothing to do with what someone had did, but someone was hurting. People are hurting by the things that they see. And we can't do this anymore. Other officers, you need to step up. And I know chiefs of police are at the top, and they don't see what's going on. But these commanders, these lieutenants, these sergeants, whomever they are, we need to watch folks. We need to watch these officers. And, I'm asking people, I'm pleading with you. If this is not something you want to do, please don't come into this profession. Because this is a profession where we're here to help. It's not all about locking up somebody. Because you can make the decision, I'm not going to lock you up for this small thing. What I'm going to do is find you some help. And that sometimes people just need a chance. They need help with small things. On the video, it was just so hurtful. He said, you guys are going a little too far. And you and I talked about this. I can't say what was in his mind, but I put myself in his shoes. When I just thought about it, I would have run too, because I would have thought, this is life or death. If I don't run, I'm going to die.
Yes.
And ultimately, he died.
Yeah.
I don't know. And to see, I think it was and correct me if I'm wrong, was it the councilman, one of the council members who gave an interview with Don Lemon, and he couldn't hold back his tears. And he said, he kept apologizing. And Don said, don't apologize for being human.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's this is 2023, and we are still seeing these things on television. Rodney King was how long ago?
Oh yeah, in the 80s. That was a long time ago.
Right. And this is 2023, and we're still seeing it.
But we're still seeing it, even with George Floyd being in 2020, and officers saw what happened. So let's say that you were this rogue cop that would do these things, right? So the death of George Floyd taught you nothing, that you continue to go out and police this way. And I know what police leadership has a tough job, right? And so leaders have to be careful. Who's ever at the helm of the agency need to say with absolute certainty, like, there is no room for this in our agency. And if you do this or anything similar like to this, and I'm not talking about murdering somebody, I'm talking about the behavior that leads up to that, right? Because with this Scorpion unit, I guarantee you that if someone go back and look at their arrest and view their body-worn cameras for that arrest, they will see similar behavior. Someone turned a blind eye on this. There's no way those guys just woke up on January the 7th and decided they were going to go out and police. And when they pull someone over without PC to pull them over, right, and just decided that probable cause and decided that they were going to pull him over. Now you're taking him out of the car. So I'm just trying to see how you justified the stop. Like, were you going to arrest him? Like, what were the proper calls for that? Like, I'm not sure. And Chief C.J. Davis said that she has not found anything to be able to substantiate the reason for them even making the stop. And that's what I want us to say as leaders in policing, to say, let's just take a step back at this, not, oh, they violated use of force or our policy and we don't train like this and this doesn't represent who we are. People are tired of hearing this, right? Because I'm tired of hearing it. I'm on the outside now. I'm tired of hearing it. I want to see some police leaders really come forward and say that they're really going to put their money where their mouth is, right? Because it could easily be their family member. Like it could easily be someone they love when we go out and there's someone in there somewhere in the leadership of that unit or a similar unit, right? There's someone that's encouraging this behavior. Right. Because the officers, we know, Nickie, we've been in policing for a long time, have been in policing for a long time. We know that you just don't get a unit of officers and the supervisor is saying, no, we got to follow the law and the guidelines. And these officers just say, oh, no, I'm going to go out and do what I want to do today. Like that's not what's happening. Someone needs to admit that's what's happening. Lives depend on us to get it right this time. And the public is saying we're going to hold you accountable. And I think that that's the first start of this whole thing, is to say we're going to hold police departments accountable for the actions of their police officers.
Right. No, I agree. Because if you want to be a police officer, whatever city, whatever state, this is what you have to abide by. If you fail to abide by this, you will be terminated and or go to jail.
Yes.
Period. And then this is another thing. So when you go to jail, they want to protect you. They put you in this special place and no, because all this time you've been locking people up. And now it makes me wonder, the folks you've been locking them up, have you been treating them like this or something similar to?
Yeah.
Right. So why should you get special treatment?
Yeah.
You shouldn't. You shouldn't get special treatment. This was somebody's son who every time I see the video, he looked up at him and kind of turned and said, aren't you guys doing a little too much?
Yeah.
He was just and I just feel, and his mother, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. And my prayers go out to you and your family. And she still wants peace.
Yeah.
She still wants peace. And I think the leaders, it's so hard. A lot of folks feel like, oh, I want to be a chief. I want to be this rank, this lieutenant, this sergeant. With that rank, there's a lot of responsibility.
Yes.
And with that rank, those positions, you may have to make some choices you don't want or unfavorable to the agency.
Yes.
Right? Because what is it? The code of silence.
Yes.
It has to end.
Yes.
You have to be honorable if you want to do this. And some people say, I want this profession because some agencies you do not have to have a degree. So I don't think having a degree versus not having one will make you a better officer per se, because, you can learn some things. Yes. But what I am saying is, when you want to come into a field or enter a field such as law enforcement, this is something that you have to want to do for the right reason. And I don't know if we need to revamp some of our psychological questions, and we need to hold supervisors, starting from, not all agencies have a lot of different ranks, but in my agency, we had corporals and private first class and sergeants. And so each rank, you have to realize that you are held accountable to supervise as an overseer. And if you see things, documented, and it needs to be addressed, because like you said, their behavior didn't start with that one incident, unless it was a couple of officers and the other ones just were get-withs for whatever reason. That's unacceptable. It's
but you know what I think about with that, like with a specialized unit, and even if the other officers were a get-with, right? Did they want to be in that unit so bad that they was willing to sacrifice like their morals, their values, break the law to do nothing to watch someone get murdered, basically? Like,
Right.
because you could probably ask to leave that unit. I learned that the unit, I mean, it's disbanded now, but the unit was made up of like 40 officers, and I guess it was 4 squads of 10 officers, and they started, it was created in 2021 to combat violent crime. And so, but at what cost? Because like you go out and you lock up people with guns, but everyone still have like civil rights. Are you violating civil rights? Like, what does that look like? Like, there has to be accountability. You can't just like have a sick 'em squad.
Right.
Like, that's what it is. We just gonna put you out there and say sick 'em. Like, go get whomever. And so what does that look like? Does that look like any black person? Because clearly this young man like is driving, does not give the police any reason so far like to even have stopped him, right? Other than the fact that he was black. And conversation has come up about it being 5 black officers that did this. And I just go back to my point that is embedded in a culture. You have to look at why policing was started, and back in
Right.
slavery, and even with the midnight shift to be able to catch runaway slaves. Like, you got to look at that. So just because you bring black people and allow black people, because that's what started happening earlier. Like, black people were allowed to be police officers, and then you couldn't ride in a car and you had to walk. And then it's things that evolved over time. And I actually could be a black female that's an assistant chief in the nation's capital, right? So you can see how things evolve. But what happens to that culture that started from way back when black people were not even allowed to be police officers, right? What happened with those laws and those things that targeted minority neighborhoods? Like, have we really looked at those things to make sure that it has the balance of public safety, but also to keep people from being victims of police brutality? Like, that's where the fine line, or that balance that you have to, because as police officers and police leaders, we have a responsibility for public safety. And let's just admit, we have some small group of bad actors that are out in the community that are wreaking havoc on community. And the community is demanding that the police departments have a response for this. But the response is not what we saw. Not what I saw on yesterday. That's not the response, a violent crime response.
No.
Or like, no, absolutely not. That is not a response, the adequate response, because they responded. And we talked about this, Nickie, and you can chime in. Like, I always wonder, and just looking at their faces, like, what are you all thinking now? Like, what do you think? Are you trying to justify like what you did, or like what's happening?
Well, when you look at the video on one of the body cams, they were trying to justify, but it sounded like a cover up to me. So I put myself in, I'm the commander that comes on the scene, and I'm just listening before I say, shush, you need to go to internal affairs, right? It just sounded like they were covering up. But I just felt like you said, what were you thinking? At no point while this man was lying lifeless did you think to stop. No, I mean, no point. And it got to a point because my daughter was in the room and she was on her iPad. And Chanel, I had to turn the television because that's not okay. And I do not even want her seeing that, not at this age. At some point I want her to understand, but she's too young. I had to turn the television. I don't know what the thought process could have been, because my mind doesn't think like that. I know on my agency, and you might remember this, we had I don't want to say a similar incident to this, but an incident where an officer had done something that they should not have done to an individual and killed that person. And I remember, I'll never forget, when that call came out, I was actually in the chief's office as a chief of staff, and we stayed up all night and we reenacted, how could this have happened? I mean, we really, could he have gotten this gun? We really reenacted that. And the chief went out immediately. We do not condone this, and I think that's important. We do not condone this. And I think some people don't understand. They say, well, why can't you fire them? Well, some people have unions and officers have rights. And I know that as time goes on, some of those rights are being taken away. And I'm going to be honest, with something like this, I don't think you should have any rights. When it's just, and you have a videotape, they're just beating this man over and over and he dies. As far as, yeah, you have a right to due process and go to trial. However, as far as your job, we should not continue to pay you. We should not continue to pay you if you just outright murder somebody, because that's taken away from someone else. I believe, like I said, due process and things of that nature, but a lot of times people will remain, on the books. At this point, the agency, in my opinion, needs to separate themselves from that person, and they need to, let the courts handle it. This is unacceptable. Unacceptable.
Well, Memphis Police Department moved quickly on this in reference to, conducting an investigation so they could, terminate them from the department, and now they're charged. We've learned something from the other cases before, that departments want to say, trust us to gather all of the evidence and present it, to a grand jury, when the community is saying, wait a minute, if this was me, right, I would be arrested. I would be locked up right now. So do the same thing to police officers, especially when you look at a situation like this, that those officers knew they had body-worn cameras on, and for whatever reason, they didn't care. Like, that's what you got to look at when these things happen, is you don't care. Like, it's some part of you to think that, there'll be no consequences. It will not surprise me if community members come forward and say, hey, I was stopped by this unit and this is what happened to me.
Probably, like you said, they've done it before.
Yeah.
They didn't just wake up and just start this type of behavior.
Yeah.
It's been ignored, or no one's reviewing the body-worn doing a random check of the body-worn cameras. Like you said, citizens are complaining, and they're complaining. I don't know. I can't, or something. Like you said, I would not be surprised if this has happened before, or citizens have not complained because they fear that nothing will happen.
Yeah.
And we know that happens too. They're like, oh, they're going to look out for one another. And that has to stop too. We have to take complaints serious. Yes, there are times that people complain and we look into it and it didn't happen. I understand. But every complaint should be taken serious until we determine if it happened or not. Because if we do more of that, we will find things like this that will probably, and God willing, save somebody's life.
Yeah. No. You're absolutely right. But that's one of the reasons why we even got body-worn cameras, right? And implemented the body-worn camera program, and it's moving all around the country for every police department to actually have it, is because even with those bogus complaints, there's a body-worn camera. Like, and in my former department, you were required to activate your body-worn camera for interactions with the public. So even if someone made a bogus complaint, the department could review the body-worn camera and see whatever they're alleging didn't happen, right? Whether they were what they were alleging did not happen. So it's necessary, but for some reason, it's being ignored. I don't think that it's deterring any type of behavior, because some of the things that are happening is really shocking the conscience of. I definitely know me. It definitely did that. It defied any beliefs that I had. Like, I did not think what I saw. Yeah. It's really no words. Just like you said before, like, it's no words. And when I listened to Tyree's mother, and she said she hadn't watched the video, and she cautioned parents. And so this goes in with you saying you had to turn it off because your daughter was in the room. She cautioned parents to not allow their children to see it. It's all those things. I knew that it was bad. I knew that it was bad for Chief Davis, when she talked about in her over 30-year career, like this is the worst thing that she had seen. And she's come from different departments, from Atlanta to Durham, now to Memphis. So when you've been on the department for over 30 years, like you've seen a lot, like you've seen
Right.
during the times of the Rodney King era, like you've seen a lot of things happen in policing. I've seen is pretty tough. It's pretty
Right.
tough to hear. It's pretty tough to watch. But the correlation that I made when I watched it, it really took me back to slavery, right? And in certain slave movies that I don't like to watch because I don't, I mean, I know it's necessary because people need to be reminded of the struggle and where we came from, but it's just so hard to watch the senseless violence against another person, and a person who is not fighting back, right? Who is not resisting. And it was no different than someone going into the home back in slavery and taking out the husband, the father, the brother, the black man, and beating them and then lynching them. Like,
Right.
what happened here? Like, how does this happen and keep happening repeatedly in America? Like, let's look at this. We can't keep saying that this is not the values of police departments. Like, somebody got to really look at this and say, maybe the message is not getting down. Like, even asking the chiefs, like, what are you all saying to people entering the department and your men and women who work in the department? Like, is it clear that this stuff will not be tolerated? Because at my former department, when you arrested someone, so a manager would have to review, the supervisor and managers would have to review the body-worn camera footage. Like, it's required for you to review the footage just to make sure that the facts in the report are accurate. So that's why I say, like, I don't know if they have that same policy in Memphis, but it just tells me that I just think that if they look at some more body-worn camera footage, that this type of behavior probably would show up. I wonder how many people had to go to the hospital from some interaction with this group, with the whole entire unit, with the 40 officers, because now everyone is under scrutiny. It's not just these 5. It's the 40 officers that are in the unit. And I'm not saying every officer that's in the unit perform this way. We're talking about like this 5, but I think that for the sake of transparency, that the police department should be looking at every arrest that was made by this unit, every interaction.
Right.
Yeah.
I think so. I mean, you mentioned something about the culture, and I'm thinking back while you were saying that about my agency, and I think it's just deeply woven into the departments. What happens is, you know, those bad actors, kind of like those individuals, they'll get promoted, right? And they train younger officers underneath them, and then the officers that are, you know, are more seasoned, they're like, oh, don't worry about it. Just keep bringing me numbers. And then they cover up things like this. And if those officers are never caught, then they become empowered to continue to do it, right? And then other officers see it, and before you know it, they're taking money and they're doing all these things because they've never gotten caught. You know, and they live a lavish lifestyle sometimes and things of that nature. So it's embedded sometimes all the way up to some form of leadership. You know, some form of leadership. You know, we've heard in certain departments, you know, certain people have said, oh, we're the such and such mafia, you know, we're the Scorpion Mafia. I'm just using that name. But what happens is they have gone so long without being caught, Chanel, has gotten to the point they feel untouchable. They feel they can do what they want. You know, they can shake drug dealers down, they can beat people up because they know that, hey, nothing's going to happen to me. But what that does for the community, and you know, some officers have to understand after things like this, you're going to go through a rocky patch because the community doesn't trust you. And now you and I, we were always part of the community, but we were law enforcement and the community. Now we're on the other side where we are those citizens. We want to know answers. We're going to hold you accountable because it can't happen. While we were in the inside, we did what we could do under our command, right? So now, you know, we're not in the inside to hold those people accountable. Now we're on the outside looking at the agency saying, we know what happens inside the agencies, right? Because we've been there, and we're going to hold you accountable, and we need to keep fighting. And it's as we see, it's not a black or white thing.
Nope.
It's not a black or white thing. It's a culture thing.
Yeah.
And there needs to be, it needs to be looked into. We need some psyche valves. We need
Yeah.
to know how some folks are thinking. And some agencies are trying to go to a fitness, what do you call it, fitness fitness test every year, or a physical. However, we also, and I know it's cost effective, it's not cost effective, but guess what, there's no price on someone's life. So I guess I will say it's cost effective, because if you start to test and ask the right questions, and for the psychiatrist to be an outside person, not someone that works for the agency,
Yeah.
because then they start to be friends, and
Yeah.
maybe during those sessions they're not really paying attention, because, oh, Chanel's my friend, she may be having some small issues, but she's going to be okay. We need outside folks, independent doctors, and I don't know what they need to do yearly, because there's a lot going on, and we need to make sure the way you came into this agency, God willing, it was with good intentions, that at year 3, year 5, year 10, year 25 and 30, that you're still there, you still have good intentions. And if it's determined that you do not, you have to go. That's
Yeah.
it.
No, you're absolutely right. I know that some leaders want plausible deniability, right?
Hmm.
So the things that are happening on the lower level, this just goes to your point about the numbers. If someone's just looking at what the numbers look like, so I
Hmm.
can be on the news or in front of community to say that we have recovered X number of guns, or we're outpacing the number of guns that we did the previous 2 years. But is anyone looking at the interactions that we're having with communities to recover the gun? And it's not just about getting the gun. Like, well, what's the backstory to it? And I think that that's part of what departments need to put in their policy. Like, someone has to look at these things. That's where transparency and accountability comes in. It can't be always after, right? So
Hmm.
community needs to look at it and say, why police department is not um, recognizing this stuff until after some incident happened, right? You would look at it to almost think that we are incompetent. Like, there's no one in the group of people that look at things and say, like, let's just look at this. Like, let's see what happens. But I'm telling you, it's leadership in departments, because I know it's a lot, though, because I was there. I was that person who took the time to review a lot, because I wanted people to know that the chances of me seeing something that you did is high,
Oh yeah.
because I would spend the hours of personally looking at things, although I had a team, because I didn't want plausible deniability. I wanted to cut things off at the head if I recognized whatever it was immediately, and not just, oh, well, I'm not looking, like, I'm at this level, I'm never going to look at any of this, and just trust everyone below me. And that's part of the reason why I took a stance. And I'm just going to talk a little bit about, like, my personal story here, that I took a stance to go against my police agency, just trying to change the culture, right? Not only of how people of color was being treated inside of the department, because I know that if we don't get it right of how we treat people internally, that people in the community
Hmm.
will be subjected to that same behavior. And you see
Right.
this what happened. And I experienced isolation. And when I always think about duty to intervene, Nickie, and I have to be honest, when I hear that, right, it does something to the pit of my stomach, because I know a lot of people use duty to intervene to correlate it with, like, police brutality, right?
Right.
But I look at duty to intervene if you see someone that's doing anything unethical, like, you are supposed to come forward and say something about this. And
Right.
I did, and I was ostracized, like, for it. Like, my last
Right.
6 months on the job, my mental health was affected of the things that was done to me, right?
Right.
And so Those things were done. They're not made up in my head. And so when I look at incidents like this, and that's why I became emotional and tears in my eyes, because I look at it to say, like, we could save lives like this. Like, we could save
Yes.
lives from being lost at the
Right.
hands of police officers when you have to look at things like my example of someone looking at it saying, wait a minute. Like, first of all, I had 9 months to go before I could retire from the police department. I was
Mhm.
being sought after by other places to become a police chief. Why would I do it? Like, why would I
Mhm.
come forward and say, like, hey, it's something in the culture here? Like, we really need to look at things to make sure that it's safe, not only for the men and women working inside the agency,
Mhm.
but for a community. And if we can't do that, then what do you think the message was to anyone else in my agency if they saw me at my level step up and say, hey, these things are happening and they shouldn't be happening, and then how I am treated? Do you think somebody else is going to step up?
No, no, they're
No.
not. I mean, and I'm with you. I had spoken up a couple times, and I'll say it this way: I paid the price for stepping up.
Oh, I bet you
But guess
did.
what? I was like, okay, I'm gonna square my shoulders off and be like whatever. But and it took me a while to be whatever
Yeah.
because initially it affected me,
Yeah.
and it possibly cost me, you know, a promotion. But it's
Mhm.
okay.
Yeah.
It's okay because I can say I did the right thing.
Yeah.
And you're right, some people can't do that. They
Yeah.
feel like they can't do that. And you're right, duty to intervene involves everything,
Yeah.
you know. Um, so de-escalation is something. I don't know if we talked about that.
No, 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 we haven't. So yes, we do need to talk about that.
De-escalation is something that's not happening. And that could be use of force, but that also could be something is something as someone's making sexual advances towards somebody
Yeah.
that duty to intervene, but de-escalate that situation and say,
Yes.
hey, Chanel, hey, that's not right. Whatever it may
Yeah.
be, because what happens is sometimes people will say, hey, that bothers me. Or sometimes people won't say that bothers me because they do not want to be the one on the agency for people to turn their backs on.
Yeah.
So it's the same thing. It
Yeah.
is the same exact thing. But when we talk about from a training perspective of de-escalation when it comes to use of force, the only person that sounded like they were trying to somewhat de-escalate was the poor gentleman that lost his life.
Yeah.
Because when
Exactly.
yeah,
Yes.
I mean, because he said something, but they went to the door blazing.
Yeah.
No, this is why you were stopped. Sir, can I get your driver's license and registration? There's no nothing. You yanking out of the car, the tasing, the repeated being tased, and the aspartame, the kicking, the punching. There was no de-escalation there. It was like they were just all angry, all angry. And I'll tell you the sad part for me is I talked to a couple of police officers, and we talk about things being embedded into the culture about this situation. They said, well, he was weaving and swerving, and he wouldn't show him his hands. And Chanel, I couldn't believe what I was
Yeah.
hearing. I couldn't believe it. I was like, what?
Yeah.
And they said, well, what else were the officers to do?
Yeah.
And I think I was at a loss for words because I said, Houston, we have a problem.
Yes, for sure.
You
For
know, we
sure.
we have
Yeah.
a problem
No.
because if you saw what else were the officers to do in that situation, we have a serious problem.
Yeah.
And I, I don't know. I mean, I think we need medical staff to come in. We need psychologicals to be done. This is it's needed to save lives. We need chiefs of polices to step and say, no, they were wrong.
Yeah.
We don't need you to give us a minute to look at the evidence.
Yeah.
They were wrong. And these types of officers, we do not, need on our agencies, not just in my agency, but any agency.
Yeah. No,
And
exactly.
I think it needs to be said. It's happening way too much. But I don't know. I mean, what else can we say here today, Chanel? I have no idea.
Yeah, no, you're right. I have encountered the same thing since the release of the video yesterday, to talk
Hmm.
to officers or to see on social media where people are trying to actually justify the behavior, and I'm just like, did you watch what I watched?
Right.
Like,
Right.
clearly you didn't watch that, right? But we're so accustomed to the cover up, trying to look
Mhm.
for things to say, oh, well, they didn't comply, or if they would have just done this, or I
Mhm.
feared for my safety. All of those catchy terms that for police officers to take whatever actions they want and then
Mhm.
say that this was totally necessary, or I feared for my safety or something, like
Mhm.
that. But
Mhm.
what I found interesting on with some of the comments online from some police officers, right? This race issue definitely came up, right? And where
Mhm.
the race issue, not just the fact that it was 5 Black officers that murdered a Black man, right? It was people is pulling back the layers of saying, oh, well, because they're Black, that's why they was charged so quickly. If they would have been white officers, it's always, we're taking it to a grand jury and looking at the evidence. We're not rushing to lock them up and put them in jail, right? So you have that, and then some other people are comparing situations to white officers and saying the different thing. And I was like, oh, and these are police officers. I know
Wow.
them to be police officers, are like, have their feuding now and having these conversations to compare what happened to white and Black officers. And I know just the incident of an officer, police brutality, abuse of power. It is police brutality, abuse of power of a police officer, right? It's not a white officer, a Black
Right,
officer.
right, right.
It should not show up in police departments anywhere
Uh-huh.
in America.
Yeah,
Like,
no, you're right. And guess what? They're talking about, oh, if this person was white, or this
yeah,
is what I could care less.
me too.
Somebody
No,
is
yeah,
dead.
yes. He has a
Somebody is
son. Tyree Nichols has a son who will not be able to grow up with his dad because
right.
of this.
Yeah, I mean,
Like,
so that tells you the thought process, the
yeah,
culture.
yeah,
We're in a bad place. We're a bad place in America.
yeah,
We are in a bad place in America if that is your thought process of race and what would have happened to this person. The thought should be, how can we prevent this?
yeah,
Period. Tariq will never see his son,
yeah,
and his son will see these videos at some point.
yeah,
He will see how his father died at the hands of law enforcement, at the hands of officers that should have been protecting and serving his father to ensure that he got home safe.
yeah,
That's what he's going to think. He's not going to think, oh, if these were white officers. No, that's not going to be a thought in his mind.
yeah,
Not a thought of mine.
yeah.
It's a
No,
thought of
not
mine
at
that I'm
all.
embarrassed.
Yeah. I I know that policing is a noble profession, right? But
Yes.
we need to get it right. And this is the time, Nickie, to really get it right. Like, let's
Hmm.
stop covering up everybody, chiefs,
Hmm.
somewhere. Like, let's stop. Like, you all, every other department that this there's not Memphis Police Department, because Memphis Police Department is going through an overhaul. Like, they're going to go through the overhaul
Right.
to look at things, right? But every
Hmm.
other police department should be looking at their practices,
Hmm.
because we always want to say, as a police department, we have policies against this. But
Hmm.
what's your practice?
Right. Right.
Like, what do people do every day when they put on their uniform and they go out in the street? Like, what do they
Hmm.
do? Like,
Right.
what are we condoning? But to say, oh, but we have this policy here. So we want to show the world that we have this policy for police officers to do things differently, but we know behind the scenes that they're doing these other things.
Yeah.
So,
You're
yeah,
right. If you have a policy and you're not putting it into practice, it means nothing.
yeah,
It means nothing. Well, I want to say this, and I'm sure, Chanel, you can say the same thing. I'm looking into the screen and I'm saying to anyone out here that has ever had a bad encounter with law enforcement from two Black women that rose up the ranks and love being police officers, we are sorry. We are sorry for the experience that you've had because we're not all like that. We were not like that. And we know so many officers that are not like that. It's a culture issue. And we're going to get to the bottom of it. Whatever we need to do in order to work with agencies to come in and reform, mentor, and talk to your officers, that's what we would do in your communities. But I want to say we are sorry. We are really sorry from the bottom of our hearts for anything that you've experienced at the hand of law enforcement.
No, I agree with you, Nickie. When someone interact with a police officer, I just feel like that we're supposed to leave them better than the situation we found them in, right?
Yeah.
Because we may have to do our job and arrest someone for committing a crime, but we should do it with dignity and respect, right?
Right.
And if we have to use a level of force, it should be commiserate with whatever resistance that's going
Right.
on. We didn't see that.
No.
We didn't see that with Tyree Nichols. And
No.
so you right, and there's so many other people that we don't know your story.
Right.
So we are sorry. Please accept our heartfelt apologies because that is not what we stand for. That's not what the profession should stand for.
Right.
To police agencies, as Nickie stated, we are available to come into your department. Like if you're really serious about changing your police department, then look at women like Nickie and I, right? And I'm not saying just women, but Nickie and I are women, and we're two Black women who have been in policing for a long time, who have a relationship with community of trust, transparency, accountability. And we can go into your departments and look at not only your policy, but dig deep to see what your practice is. Because
Right.
what you need is someone who knows policing, who knows the terms that really don't mean with someone who has no experience in policing. Because I know that I could say something to someone and they will say, oh, that sounds good.
Yeah.
Chanel she's on it. She's on top of it. But if Nickie heard me say that same thing, she'll say, yeah, Chanel, you're saying this, but what about this? Like when
Right.
you all do this part of it, and you just need people who love the profession and who want to make the change all across America, not just at the agencies that we came from. And I know other women who would definitely love to do this same thing, but it's
Right.
time right now for even governors in states to look at it and say, what can I do differently in my office to bring some type of task force to make sure that every police department, in their state, like have some type of compliance with their policies and practice.
Right.
So I'm with you, Nickie. I think that, that's great. I hope someone take us up, on the offer to do this. Policing will not evolve if we don't do it. We can't
Right.
keep coming forward and having the conversation where you have law enforcement analysts that talks all the time, and we're picking apart to say this is not the policy and how we were trained, but someone needs to go a little deeper than that. And I think that's what we're saying here today is let's peel this onion instead of just the first layer, because that's what you do when these things initially happen. Someone just get the first layer to say, oh, this is their use of force continuum and the officers violated. Let's peel on down. Peel the layers of that onion to see what the culture is in your agency.
Right.
And is it for the community to thrive? Is your culture conducive for the community to thrive and the men and women that work for your department?
Right. I agree. I could not have said it any better, Chanel.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that is the end of this episode. We appreciate everyone from tuning in for this relevant conversation. And please connect with us. And Nickie going to tell you how you can email and connect with us.
Yes. So please connect with us at queensrising@gmail.com. If you need us to come out and speak, you need us to assess your agency, contact us. Community members, if you want us to come and talk to you so we can help you bridge the gap between you and your police agencies. Thank you so much and have a blessed day.
Thank you. See you all next episode.